Welcome to B2B in the Black's digital Fireside Chats. I'm your host, Khalow, CEO of BusinessOnline, a performance-driven B2B digital marketing agency. But way more important, co-founder of this amazing group and movement we call B2B in the Black. Let me introduce to you what I like to call my esteemed B2B luminaries. First, we have David Overmyer, who is the CFO of Contentstack. David, welcome.
Hi, Thad. Nice to be here.
And then we have Hope Neiman, who is a CMO of Tillster. Hope, great to see you again.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks to be here as well.
So we have a fantastic topic. In fact, this is one I'm excited, truly excited to dig in on. We're going to be talking about making the CFO an ally of the sales process as we try to translate the marketing benefits to a CFO to help us fall in love with marketing technology. And all too often, right, especially in SaaS businesses, CFOs are suddenly at the seat, they have a seat at the table. They're a part of the selling process, but they're also exceptional at finding really smart ways of saying no. And we know this, right? So the topic for today is how do we translate these marketing benefits? How do we have this conversation with the CFO so we can make them an advocate, so they can turn from, someone who's hindering the sales process to someone who's helping us to influence the purchase. So I'm really excited about this conversation for two reasons, Hope and David. Number one is the topic itself. I think it's fascinating, especially in this day and age that we live in, this COVID world. But even more specifically, because the two of you aren't colleagues, right? You come from different organizations, so we can have a real drag down, knockout fight if need be around this very particular topic. And maybe I think a place to start, David, is with you, right? And as you think about your career, and as you think about marketing's role and function within business, what is the type of terminology? What are the types of conversations you look for marketing to bring to you as they're beginning to proposition new technologies and new ways of doing things to drive growth or efficiency within an organization like Contentstack?
Yeah, that's a great question. And let me start by saying I've never said no to Hope. We're off to a great start. So
I love it.
I think the way that I would think about it is to me, and one of the things that we've done at Contentstack and some of the prior companies I've worked with is trying to come up with a common language. So the one of the most important things is, that I understand what the marketing teams might be bringing to me, and they kind of understand the language that I bring back to them, versus getting maybe some kind of marketing speak or things that, MQLs, SQLs, and conversion rates that, while I know what they are, I don't think about them every day. So having something that we see on dashboards, in conversations, that we kind of instantly connect and know what we're talking about. That's a really important thing for me. So the conversation kind of doesn't spin off into what does that mean, or kind of having to dive into more details.
And let me ask you this, and hoping I'll turn it over to you in a second. So there is, obviously the alignment around the marketing speak that needs to make sure that we need to articulate in a way that you can understand and it lands and you understand the business value of how we're trying to position a piece of technology. But what do you expect from marketers to bring to the table, David, in terms of their understanding of finance, notion of free cash flow, discounted rates, IRR, as you're thinking about understanding and extracting risk from making a move like this? I know, and I'll stop there.
Yeah. So the Contentstack as one example, and some of the other companies that I've worked with that have been kind of in the earlier stage, call them B and C stage companies, where we are in investment mode and really kind of hyper growth mode. I think the kind of our IRR or free cash flow isn't really a thing that I necessarily look at. I'd say that if we have one overriding KPI, it would be CAC, which is customer acquisition cost. So we have a way at Contentstack that we measure that. It's called a CAC payback. It's a monthly payback and spend. And I think making sure that our sales leaders, our marketing leaders, and our finance team, kind of understand the definition that CAC is. We try to operate within a range. I mean, I literally have a graph that I have a a red line and a green line. So if we're in between the red and the green, we're kind of operating where we want to be. If we're going better than green, it's kind of put your foot on the gas. And if we're starting to slip below the red, it's maybe tap the brake. So I think understanding it from kind of a holistic approach is how we think about it. And again, for us, it's investment. It's what kind of investment in the whole go-to-market spend is going to bring us, in ARR, in bookings and new business.
Okay. And Hope, I know you have a degree in math, which I think is fascinating for a marketer, and I love that. What type of experience and knowledge do you have in terms of the world of finance, and what types of conversations have you had with your past CFOs to bridge this gap?
It's interesting because it very much varies between it being businesses that are consumer driven, businesses that are B2B driven in this case, but also in our case, it's a B2B to C world that Tillster works in, and that I've also dealt with in part of my past. And so it's as much about how can you help me as my finance partner also provide information to the people we're selling to. What would you have had to know if you're on the other side of this, as opposed to just what are you letting me spend and letting me not spend, which makes them a true partner in the whole issue of selling in the process, and gives them, I think, a little bit of a greater understanding when I'm coming saying, we can't look at something that's directly attributable from a cost perspective, but how do we look at the multiple touch points to be able to share both to our external partners, but to you, which is, it might be that one particular part of our mix is being very successful at bringing people, but we find that anybody who touched something else that isn't the last step is doing much better. So we can't look at a strictly ROI basis on each part of our marketing programs, but how does it look in aggregate, and what pieces are really playing best in order to get my CFO to yes.
I love it. And I think you're touching on that notion of attribution or influence, right? Because in a B2B process, multiple stakeholders, it's a long endeavor. And it's a very difficult thing to truly pinpoint that, $1 in delivers 5 in return. I hope I'll put this back to you, and then I've got another follow-up question for you, David. But when you had those conversations, number one, how have you positioned it in a way that helps finance to understand this notion of attribution or influence, that it's multiple tactics and channels and campaigns that produce a win versus the final last touch, which everyone loves to give credit for. What does that conversation look like to you successfully?
For me, it's more than a conversation. I do a lot of talking generally to anybody on our finance team, and just generally anyway, but I'm a very visual person. And even though sometimes the finance team is not as visual, I find that it makes it easier for me to talk from words and pictures, and more so numbers that they can understand. So creating the right kinds of dashboards that allow us to showcase what touch points somebody who actually came in as a customer and what it really means, so that together we can agree that we're looking at the same set of metrics, is really important. The other part of that is, because of what we do for our customers, we're having to not just, we're selling in to marketing people, but also to finance people, to help them understand, here's what the dashboards you're going to have about our tools look like for them. So on an ongoing basis in that sales experience, they're all talking on the same wavelength to each other, which makes for a better ongoing relationship with our customers too. So it's more than even just the finance team I'm working with. It's helping my customers on the marketing side talk to their finance teams more appropriately, and to actually prove out that our tools are being as effective as possible in a way that they can all agree on.
I love it. And David, when you think about from a presentation or visualization perspective, dashboarding, what are the things that you're looking for as the CFO of Contentstack, and then how are you providing your team the ability to make that case on behalf of the customers that they're trying to sell to.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't actually kind of 100% rely on dashboards. I think in some ways people are overestimating a little bit some of the data-driven metrics that come out. And I think what Hope just mentioned, and I love this, and I don't think it happens as often as it maybe should or could, which is for somebody to come in and kind of paint a picture. So I can look at dashboards and I can see things and pop in and kind of see trends, but I don't not often have the time. And again, sometimes the language gets a little fuzzy and you're thinking about different things. So if somebody can come in and present, this is what it means. I mean, I often say, and probably more to people that work in my own teams, like almost always kind of pretend you're presenting something to a board if you're bringing it into an executive level kind of conversation, because although a CEO may be sitting in the room with you, they're thinking about a lot of different things and their head's not instantly grasping the things that Hope probably knows. She just knows everything about it. So it's kind of, it is a little art form in terms of presentation, and then trying to take the science versus the art of marketing. And I do appreciate the difference of those two things, and trying to kind of paint that picture.
But I think that's really true, David. I mean, I think that I love your analogy of like you're always presenting to the board. One of the things that we have worked really hard from my team with our account people is how do we put together the right kind of QBR, quarterly business reviews, with our customers, so that when we present it to the people that work with our tools every day, they know that chart 2, chart 5, and chart 7 should always be elevated up to their senior leadership, to their finance teams and others, because they tell a story in a split second with the terminology that they want. And so it's back to that kind of presentation versus how do you have enough at a high level, but have the depth to support it and have those things really work together in a cohesive way.
I'll give a great example, Hope. We had I wasn't on this call, but I heard about it subsequently, a customer QBR, so it was our success team, and they hadn't quite got, and they really kind of polished up this presentation, and it was what I would call kind of board ready, right? It's almost a one slider. And the stakeholder at the customer came into the meeting late, saw the slide, said, "That's awesome," turned around, left the meeting, and thought everything was going great. So they literally just got that snack, and it was something they could digest.
Love it.
In 30 seconds. So I think that it's super important, kind of how it is the presentation itself.
And one of the things we're doing, if I can just add one more thing to that, is that
yeah, sure.
Is that one of the things we're doing with data internally is we are trying to demystify it even among our own team members, so that the tools that we're communicating to our customers with have a level of depth, but also a high enough level across our organization so that it's inspiring people, whether they're in the finance team or the customer success team or the sales team or the operations team, to look at it and go, wow, I can contribute to the business in this other way. And we're now finding that our customers are doing the same thing.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that, in terms of this notion of data and dashboards, and to the point that David was making, those are only as good and as such that you can extract insights that give you the confidence to take action, right? We often find ourselves saying the client doesn't get it, and we gave them this, and they're not acting on a campaign. Well, we probably didn't summarize the insights in a way that landed to enable them with enough confidence to take the action they need to. So, which may be a nice segue into the next, type of question, which is, how do we create credibility and when do we lose it? So again, I'll start with you, David, as you have, folks bring to you marketing technology or new ways forward from a marketing perspective. What are you looking for in creating this credibility to feel confident to move from no to yes?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to the things we just talked about, which I think are a huge component of kind kind of getting to that. I think what's really important, or what I certainly like to hear, are kind of ideas and options. And with those options, recommendations. So, kind of I view kind of the marketing as it's a big basket of investment. We kind of decide early in a year or a quarter, whatever the time period might be, kind of where we think that's going to go and where it's going to be allocated. It's always changing. Something's changed. Events are changed, in today's world, right, as an example. So there's always this experimentation and looking at different things and different options. And I think coming with kind of being armed somewhat with the facts, but also bringing in an options and opinions to that, just opens the discussion up to kind of where you're going. And then you kind of get confidence, right? That it is really well, you can kind of figure out fairly fast if it's fairly well, thought out, or somebody really, has an opinion. And sometimes it is just a best guess or opinion on some of this.
Sure. Hope, what do you do to drive that confidence and credibility, you or your team?
I think that one of the things we have to do is not be afraid of bad news. So I think so often everybody wants to always come in with the look how great things are. I think it's about having that sense of reality of look how great things are, but here are the areas we need to improve. And very much to what David just mentioned, having options for what that improvement is. So it shows that we're not burying our head in the sand or looking at everything so, beautifully, that every program we ever did was great. One of the things that my team does a lot of, because I also own our data science team, is we advocate a lot for A/B testing in our applications for our customers. And sometimes they're afraid of that because they don't want to have to go to their leadership and say, oh, this thing we tried didn't pan out quite the way we wanted. And part of what we have to instill in them is it's the only way we all get smarter. So let's make sure we're looking at where we can do the most good. Let's test into it and admit if it's right or wrong, because it's the customer who's voting. You can't have all the answers yourself, and you have to be really open and put your ego aside in doing that. I find that if you engage everybody, make them part of it, and have that sense of, honesty, it comes off as extremely authentic, and it does nothing but build trust for the next time when you are coming in with the good news that's legitimate.
Yeah, because you can oversell, right? And I think a lot of, especially CFOs, have their antenna up for the bullshit when folks are overselling the benefits or potential outcomes. I love it. And we talked about this notion. I'm sorry, David, did you have anything else you wanted to share?
No.
Cut you off. Okay. We mentioned earlier this notion of, how do we retain the sizzle in a sales process, right? And I think about, pitching to a board or C-level or CFOs and maintaining the sizzle, right? Because you got to keep that momentum. And often we're looking at things in terms of risk and reward. And I wonder, in terms of your personality, David, and how you weigh things, are you looking at more, of eliminating risk, and that's what gets you excited, and that's the sizzle, or is it the reward and the upside and the potential for growth that gets you continue to lean back into a potential idea or a new investment?
Yeah, I mean, at our company stage, and companies I love to have worked with in the past, being in kind of these high growth, high investment situations, I've already accepted risk by being there. And that's part of it, and that's the fun. So I actually really, I like the risk reward view. I don't want, kind of crazy uncalculated risk is not something, other than some brand new minted company, you might do that. But at a company like ours, we're not going to take unwarranted risk, but we certainly experiment and take risk. So I don't mind that at all. What I would like to know, at some points of measurement, every quarter, or whatever you kind of determine it is how did we do? How's it working? So it's that kind of constant, changing of lanes that you need to be able to do.
Right.
And when I hear that, David, I hear, that there's a responsibility as we have an inventory of the ideas or new programs or technology we're bringing to you and the board to check back in and say, okay, we made this investment, this is where it lands, into that original question around credibility, right? So we made this supposition, we went for it, and here's where we are. And and I guess that list is going to help to give you some either confidence or lack thereof that you're heading in the right direction as you make these.
I mean, very much. I mean, we look at our pipeline generation, another like super high level KPI for us, and we make some assumptions on the, let's say, the mix of that pipeline. You know, is it a partner channel? Is it an outbound effort? Is our marketing teams an inbound? You know, whatever that mix might be. And we're never right. It's always different than we had predicted, and then we want to kind of understand which ones are working, and maybe where do we double down, and maybe where do we slow down, or more important, kind of how do we kind of diagnose the engine a little bit and see what might not be working there.
Yeah.
I hope it sounded like you had something, or?
No, I think that's a really fair point. I actually have a question for David on this one, which is generally, what's the time parameter that you're looking both for a check-in and a check-in tied to where the end point is that it was supposed to deliver? Because I find that's a place that sometimes there's some conflict or lack of understanding, is that time frame is really different between sometimes what the CFO is expecting and what the marketing person is anticipating.
Yeah, that's actually a really tough question. So the time frame for let's just take our pipeline. You know, we would look at it every week. You know, we have like I think you mentioned, you know, there's weekly check-ins, but you don't want to overreact to it on a weekly basis, because
Right.
it really moves on a weekly time sync. I would say we look at it quarterly, but you know, I also know that different funnels or different ways to build pipe have longer cycles, right? So I'm almost going to bounce it back to you, because that's a question I'd actually have in a sync with a CMO, is how long does it take us to actually get a result, or actually know if it's a outbound program that has a longer cycle than something that's come inbound. You know, how long should we wait, or how long should we take to evaluate it?
And from my perspective, it's very much also an it depends. And the depends is really from us, because so much of what we do is very long sales cycles, although I must say they're shortening. Especially in this COVID world, given what we do, which is digital for restaurants, everybody and his brother suddenly wants everything yesterday. So how we measure how well we've done has changed in the last 4 months or 5 months, but it changes also depending on, is it an add-on to something we're doing to somebody who's either a customer or used to be a customer? What's it happening where if it's given the product offering where they need 7 people to participate and weigh in versus somebody who can make the call on their own, like, you know, a delivery integration or something along those lines. So, but I find that window, everybody can look at everything weekly, but best case, it's monthly or quarterly, depending on what it is. And at least a level set. It might just be a check-in that says, what are we seeing directionally? Do we have to do anything this month? Or can we wait and let it play out for the quarter, or play out for the 6 months, but usually quarter. And it's just that, again, it makes everybody aligned in a way that it's just an opportunity to have that conversation. And I think the more you feel a kinship and a participant, as opposed to somebody that's being presented to, the more likely it is that you're going to have a better joint outcome.
Yeah, and I think, Hope, we're very similar in that. I'd really say the real evaluation kind of review or cadence would be quarterly. You know, a lot of things you're obviously checking in every week and on how's it going. You're not going to dramatically probably change something in a 1 week cycle, but it's typically a quarterly for us as well.
And I have to say, one of the things that for us is a danger with what we do on behalf of our customers, because we're publishing out real-time data for them to share with their teams, there is this belief of, I'm going to keep hitting refresh and forget looking at it every quarter, every month, every week. I'm going to look at it every 10 minutes. And that's something that, and again, a great example is we're doing a very significant A/B test right now with a customer of ours. And to verify the kind of changes we're talking about, we need to have a pretty good number of sessions. It's at least a 3-week cycle. I mean, we're getting pinged by them daily of, oh my God, look what happened like in the last 2 hours. It's like, you can't look at the last 2 hours, and you have to teach people why and what you need to look at, and literally to sometimes close off those metrics and not look at them out of fear that you're going to have a knee-jerk reaction that won't be the right one.
Yeah, I think that's astute, especially in this data-driven testing world we live in. I always love to learn from people's mistakes, and I'm wondering from both of you, where in this, in presenting, marketing technology to the board or CFO, where it's gone wrong, it's when it's gone off the rails, where it's caused friction, and what was the insider learning that we can take away from that? David or Hope, any good experiences?
Hope, I'll let you start this one.
No, you start this one. I'm sitting here thinking about it.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think, again, we have pros and cons to everything we're saying here, but one of the things is taking too long to react to something. I think that happens a lot. So, you have to kind of make this decision on, I said you can't decide every week. You can't decide every week, but you can't wait too long to see something might not be working and to change it. I think one of the interesting things for me right now is, and this isn't really reflective of mistakes, but it's kind of a challenge going forward, are all the different tools and resources and processes that are out there, and trying to kind of decide what to go with, what to change, or what not to change. I find it a bit overwhelming. I get asked, oh, can we acquire this tool? Can we use this? Can we change that? And it's difficult for me to even answer. So I think I find that a challenge.
So you actually made a very interesting comment that I want to react to, that I think plays to this, which is, I think you can't buy in. You can't believe the Kool-Aid too quickly. If something's going well, I don't think you can say it's going well and feel good. You could just kind of hang back and allow your time to play out. But if something's going badly, you have to be able to acknowledge what it is, verify the numbers, see if there's another way to sort of not change course, but slightly shift on it without letting it go too far. And so I think there's really a difference between how you're looking at that, if it's going badly or it's going well. The flip side of that also is something else you had remarked on, which is about the tools. It's really critical to decide upfront what you're going to use to measure, what those KPIs are. And while there might be extras, what's just a nice to have? Because I hate to admit it, but I can play the numbers game as well as anybody. I can find the right data point to make something look fabulous. And
you sound dangerous, Hope.
I am dangerous. In that sense, when it comes to data, I am. But you have to get everybody on the same page about it, so that somebody can't play that game with you, no matter which side of the table you're on, whether it's on the marketing side or finance. A CFO I worked with in the past was as good as I was on the other side to be able to flag it in a way that wasn't necessarily the way I wanted to hear it. So we made for a lot of really great conversations. But I think that setting what those parameters are is really critical. And I think that one of the things I've done in my career a lot is not taking the accepted metrics either. So making sure that it's a metric or a series of metrics that everybody can buy into. And while it might be established for the industry, it may not be ideal for your business or for how to really measure it. So I'll give you a silly but a real example. One of the things in what we do is you'll look at what the average check is in a restaurant, or you'll look at what the conversion is that's happening. And the CFOs are all like, well, unless you can increase my average check 20%, I'm not going to let you buy into that program that Tillster's doing. And part of what we recommend is using a metric that not a lot of people are familiar with, which is revenue per session. Because how much traffic, and are you driving the right kind of traffic to your website? Are you attracting the right kind of people? Because I can adjust your conversion based on who I'm driving. That's no good. Make sure you're bringing together so that you've got average check, the right kinds of people, and the right kinds of promotion. And in a single metric, I can look at those in something we can all agree on is what's yielding the best revenue for that customer, so that the CFO and the marketing person on the other side of who we're selling to can all be nodding up and down and saying, yep, that's a good combination of all the levers we can pull, not allowing us to only measure it to a single lever.
I like that. Yeah, that's super insightful. In taking this last round of questions here, I'd love to move into predictions on two fronts, and we'll start with this. What are the two of you predicting that we should be thinking about that most of us are missing over the next 3 to 6 months? And I'm going to focus on the next 3 to 6 months because obviously there's a lot of volatility in the world that we live in today. What in terms of what you're reading, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what should folks really take a step back and think about that they're not as they continue to chart the course over these next 3 to 6 months? David, any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole world's living in the pandemic time. I think there's definitely this shift to what we're doing right here. We're doing this over a Zoom meeting. And I think this whole aspect of digital engagement is just, coming more and more. It's a thing that's been happening obviously for many years, but I think it's coming more and more to the forefront. I mean, our business is about digital engagement. This is what Contentstack is and does. We see it with customers and we see it with potential customers. People are knowing that they need to react to perhaps a little bit different world. And I think it's status quo in terms of the way the world's operating today. I actually think in the short term, in the 3 to 6 months, just based on the last couple of weeks, I don't think it's going to change a whole lot. And I think some companies will take this time to actually shore up how they think about the next 2 to 3 years after the next 3 to 6 months and think about how that impacts their businesses.
So I think there's a lot of richness in what you just said, David. And interestingly, I'm going to give you a data point that a player in our industry recently talked about, which is when you look at what the sentiment is, where consumers believed, where things were, it got better for a while and it's actually gotten worse. And I think that is prevalent around business as anything else, but I don't think it has to be bad. I think we have to look at it kind of in 3 buckets. The first is, how do we, as marketers, from my side, help equip people to both sell better and measure better to the CFOs? That it's forcing us to be much more disciplined about tools that can be showcased and put out there that we're all agreeing on, because we're not sitting in a room and going out for a drink and doing all that. We're having to be very structured. And so I think it's causing some of that structure to happen. I think the second part of that, though, is it's also giving us a little bit of cover of how to better manage our business. What are we really delivering, especially in a world that's becoming more digital? Because like David, our business is, but how do we help our customers bring more customers, measure and better equip their business? That it's not enough to just show things that are the easy metrics. It's things that are where you're a real differentiator, not just where you're doing something a little bit better than their next one, but how am I helping them move their business ahead materially in a world that's fundamentally changing. And that's a different way of selling and a different way of putting forth issues than I think people have before.
Yeah, I think it's super insightful. And Hope, I'll start with you on this last question, which is, what are we overprojecting? Like, what are folks overreacting to that we should just dial it back and not necessarily overreact to in this current environment?
I think people are projecting that. I think the economy is going to suffer, but I don't think it's in the same way that people think. I think it's going to just shift. And I think we have to help it shift in a way that makes it easier. But the other half of that question is, I don't think we're going to shift back when things open up. There's this whole belief of, well, when we go back to normal, well, you know what? Normal's changed. And we got to look at what that new normal is going to be, even when we're out of our homes and back in offices and doing anything else. People aren't going to go back to the old way of doing things. They're going to take what really worked and move it forward. And I think we have to be, we all have to pull out our crystal balls and figure out what those pieces are and push those forward as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Hope. I think it will be different, once we get kind of past the crisis that it's in now. And I think, I don't know, it's hard to, Thad, you kind of said, how are we overreacting? It's so hard because we don't actually kind of know where this will end or kind of how long it will be.
Or when.
Yeah, we get, I think when we shut our offices in early March, it was kind of, see you in 2 months, we'll nail this work from home thing. We were already really good at it, but that was, I don't know when, 4 months ago. So, and we know it's going to continue. So I think I agree with you, Hope. I think it's going to be different even when the COVID thing itself has changed. I think people are going to have learned how to live maybe a little bit differently. I think some will be super slow to kind of get back to their normal way of doing things, somewhat out of, caution. Some will go right back to what they're doing because they're ready to do it. But it'll be different, and it'll take some time. I don't know if it will ever kind of come back, but fully the way it was. And that's, I'm not suggesting that's good or bad, but I think it's just a new way things will happen.
But it sure will be different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be different. And my hope in all this is that even in this new world where there's higher levels of extremes, higher highs and lower lows, that we learn to operate in it, right? Because we've been working in this world that's changing fast. Now the word change isn't aggressive enough. It's like volatile. It's volatile fast, right? There's just so much volatility in every industry. And I think that's going to be the world leadership is going to have to operate in as we move forward and not stop, right? Because I think when there's that level of volatility, we saw in late March and early April, which is things began to slow down. And even right now, even though we know how bad it is, I think we have an understanding so we can operate in this moment. But I think that, living in that new world, will be the new normal. Well, look, Hope and David, this has been fantastic. You guys were great to connect with. I appreciate the time you shared, the insights and the wisdom. And I know our viewership will enjoy this conversation. So I just wanted to thank you for that. And I appreciate your time.